From painting colorful murals to serious military surveillance, the Center for the Study of the Drone really does study them all. I'm Tonya Hall, and joining me is Arthur Holland Michel, writer and researcher, founder and co-director of the Center for the Study of the Drone at Bard College. Welcome, Arthur.
Hi, it's great to be here.
So you've been here before. To talk a little bit about the Center of the Study of the Drone and how it came about.
Sure. So I was actually an undergraduate at Bard College, where the center is now based. And my research at the time for my degree was actually in the history department. But privately, I was spending a lot of time thinking about drones. This was in 2010, 2011, 2012, when drones were really appearing in the news with increasing frequency, both in terms of the military uses of drones. They were being used extensively for targeted strikes outside of war zones, but also in terms of the commercial, the domestic use. There was talk of opening the US airspace to drones, and no one was really sure how that was gonna work. And so in the summer of 2012, I was actually sitting in a bar with a friend. This was right before the start of my senior year at Bard. And suddenly I just had this idea. I said, we need to study this topic. And not only do we need to study it, we need to study it in this very sort of liberal arts, interdisciplinary way so that we can get all the angles, we can really activate a whole range of communities in the academic space to think about how we can address some of these challenges. And also in that very moment, I had the name fully formed in my head. It is the Center for the Study of the Drone. And it's very important, the drone, because we only really study one drone at the end of the day.
So, what is the operating philosophy for the center? I mean, how do you decide what topics matter?
Sure. Well, there are a couple of things. One is that we want to help close the lag between technology and policies that regulate it. And we feel that there are a couple of things that make that lag last longer. One of them is that there is a lack of basic understanding within the policymaking community about how the technology works. And so to address that, a lot of our work is fundamentally educational in nature. We will find an issue that has significant policy implications, and we will really just explain what the issue is, why it's an issue, how the different elements work, who the stakeholders are who are involved. And we found that stakeholders really appreciate that kind of content because it breaks things down for them. A second part of what lengthens that lag is that these are often very polemical issues. They're very divisive. And there is a lack of materials, of resources that are not driven by an agenda. So there are a lot of organizations working in this space, but they have policy goals. They are trying to form the government's policy on these topics. We do not have that position. We are not trying to push for any particular set of policies. To radically oversimplify it, we are not pro-drone or anti-drone. And because everybody knows that that's our position in this space, our content, our research reports can serve as kind of a common ground for these groups. And so, you are just as likely to see the Pentagon using our content as you are to see the human rights advocacy community, the privacy rights and civil liberties community. And for me, that's super important to what we do.
What areas of drone technology and application are most interesting or even controversial today?
So it's funny, when I started doing this work, 80% of the time that I got a call from someone, they would be asking the same question. Arthur, what can we do with drones? What are all the possibilities here? Are they going to deliver burritos to us? Are they going to walk our dogs? Are they going to, be used for I don't know, in inspecting infrastructure. Um, Today, a lot of the calls I get come with exactly the same question: how do we shoot them down? Because it has become apparent to wide groups, wide in all sorts of different industries and agencies and spaces, that drones can be a risk. They can close down airports, for example. They can pose a risk at large crowded events. They can be a particular risk if there is malicious intent behind the use of the drone, say in a terrorist attack. And so there has been a tremendous amount of interest in recent years in anti-drone technology, also known as counter-drone technology. And the issue there is that counter-drone technology is illegal for most people to use in the United States unless you're with a small number of federal agencies. It can be very dangerous, and it often doesn't even work. And so there are all these really significant issues coming out around that, which I find tremendously fascinating. So I say that as a bit of a plug because I have a new report on counter drone technology that will be coming out sometime in probably September, where readers will be able to get a sense of how the technology works, what are its limitations, and what some of the paths forward are.
To your point, drones are used in a variety of ways, and there's a lot of fun use. I gave one to my father recently for Father's Day, and certainly there's some potentially bad actors out there. I mean, everything from painting murals to including smuggling contraband to
Mm.
prisoners. So you mentioned terrorist attack, but what are some of the most inventive and creative applications of drones you've seen?
One of my favorites is the defibrillator drone. And the idea there is that if someone's having a heart attack, it may take 10 to 15 minutes for an ambulance to arrive, which those are really precious minutes. What if you can fly a drone as the crow flies, a direct beeline to that heart attack victim within minutes of the emergency call? The drone lands, it has a defibrillator and instructions, and those who are there assisting the victim can provide that assistance right on the spot. Um, that I think is a kind of sweet spot for drone technologies because it is this narrow application where there is really no other alternative. And if there were an alternative, it would probably be very, very expensive. So I think that one is really great. We are seeing experiments with defibrillator drones in a few countries. We're also seeing it here. I think in Nevada there has been a pilot program. Conservation has also been really interesting. Counting numbers of animal species for scientific studies. That one has been tremendously popular for a variety of reasons. And then I'll give you one more: insurance appraisal, something that people don't often think about. But every time there is a storm and there are a large number of homes that sustain damage to their roofs, usually you will have human appraisers that will have to climb up and take photographs. And that is actually tremendously dangerous. There are injuries in that industry every year. Well, now the industry often just uses a drone. They fly the drone up for a few minutes over the roof of a house, and they're able to get a very high resolution imagery of whatever damage there might be without putting any human lives at risk. You can't really argue with that, right?
No, you can't. And I certainly think using drones for all types of emergency issues, whether it's fire, at places that maybe emergency personnel can't go. But that leads me kind of to the next question. Unmanned vehicles also operate underwater. So, what are some of the emerging topics of interest there?
Sure. So at the moment, most of that space has really evolved in the world of defense and intelligence. I mean, that's really, as with the case of aerial drones, that's where the early innovation often happens. And so the US Navy, for example, has invested heavily in unmanned submarines and unmanned surface vessels. At the moment, that is primarily for intelligence collection. So I'll give you one example of that. As tensions are escalating with China and Russia, the US Navy would like a way to track some of their submarines without putting human sailors at risk. Well, if you have a small drone that's able to navigate the seas at a close standoff distance to, say, a Russian nuclear submarine, you're able to maintain a constant track on that vehicle, again, without putting any human lives at risk. We've also seen extensive uses of the similar technology in the oil and gas industry for undersea mapping. And more recently, for retrieving or exploring items that are on the seafloor. So there have been a number of archaeological discoveries on the seafloor using these unmanned vehicles. They've also been used in the search for the Malaysia Airlines flight that went missing a few years ago. And finally, scientific exploration. So there is a charming little research vessel from the United Kingdom with the name, and this is not a joke, this is 100% real, Boaty McBoatface, which has just had its results published from its first scientific study where it was measuring water temperature in the Arctic. And that is giving us all sorts of insights into climate change that we didn't have before at a much lower cost. So there are tremendous opportunities in that space.
Arthur Holland Michel, writer and researcher, author of Eyes in the Sky, The Secret Rise of Gorgon Stare and How It Will Watch Us All, and founder and co-director of the Center for the Study of the Drone in Bard. If somebody wants to connect with you, Arthur, maybe they want a copy of your book or find out more about your research, how can they do that?
I think easiest way is at my website, arthurhollandmichel.com.
Sounds good. And if you guys want to find more of my interviews, you could do that right here or go to tonyahall.net. Thanks for watching.